The Seattle hat? Come on.
Yeah, I had to wear it, man. I know you from New England. I had to wear it. I had to.
That's all right. Where do you live?
Right now I live in Korea, but I grew up like in the suburb of Seattle, so it's the only team I follow now, other than fighting, because fighting is a 365-day experience. So
We
sports
shut
is
this
hard to
fireplace
follow.
off. I think. Yeah, no, I get it. I used to watch a lot more sports, but now it's basically just fighting and the Patriots.
Hey, it's the
I can't.
same to me, man. I think football is the only thing that I actually enjoy watching anymore. I could sit down and actually watch a game and have fun watching a game. Basketball and baseball and stuff doesn't do it for me anymore for some reason.
Yeah, it doesn't keep my attention. And then I used to like growing up watching the Celtics, the Bruins, and the Red Sox, but it just got to be too much. My dad still watches all of them. It's just way too much. I don't have the bandwidth for that.
Yeah, me either, man. There's too much going on, especially like yourself, you have a family, you don't even have one kid, you have a few kids, you know what I mean? It's a hectic lifestyle. You have to keep everybody satisfied. I think that's kind of like your job, man, as a agent slash manager slash coach slash strategist slash father. Everything
Yeah,
that you're doing, man. It's just yeah, that's your job. Everywhere you go, right? It's a 24-hour job. Man, how do you handle all of that? How do you handle keeping yourself sane through all of that?
honestly, I always just think back to like you can't have an ego with it. Like if a fighter says something or asks me to do something that I feel like I shouldn't be doing, it's like, well, that's what he needs done. So I do it, and obviously within reason. But I think you just got to understand that, like, how would you treat a bride on their wedding week? You know, and that's how you got to treat a fighter on their fight week. And every fight's the biggest fight of their career. It never ends. You're always climbing that tree, and the branches keeps getting thinner. So you just got to like insert yourself into their mind and understand, like, even if they're being a little bit bougie or being a little bit disrespectful, you just kind of take it on the chin and you move on. Like you can't, you gotta have a short memory, and you just gotta, dirty laundry falls on the floor, you gotta pick it up, and that's all it is. It's just not. I think it comes down to not having an ego, and then wanting just whatever's best for the fighter. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the fighter not getting hurt and then trying to get that win.
You mentioned your father. I read a tweet about your father's house burning down. Could you go into that? Was that a criminal case, or what happened with
No, it
that?
was just I think they're saying some faulty wiring with like a space heater or something, and yeah. So it was a couple Saturdays ago. It was the Saturday before I left for Moscow, and my dad called me at like 7 in the morning. So I knew something was up because he doesn't call that early. Usually, he can't sleep then. He's 73, and he just is like, everything's gone. I'm like, what are you talking about, Dad? He goes, can you do the face picture thing? I'm like, wait, FaceTime. So I FaceTime him, and he shows me, and it was just like the whole house just in flames, and like everything was gone. So I grabbed my 3-year-old. I raced over there, and there was like 6 different towns there with fire trucks putting it out and everything. So ultimately, like nobody got hurt, but nobody got hurt, but they did lose everything. So now it's just the rebuilding process. We're trying to relocate them. Him and my brother, my baby brother, live together, and yeah. So it's tough. It's you just you could dwell on like what happened and say how much it sucks, but at the end of the day, like my dad got out, his hair was all singed and everything because the hallway is so hot, but he didn't get hurt, and that's really what matters. So um, fire sucks, but it could have been worse.
Yeah, definitely, man. Well, it's great that your father was able to get out of there and be safe and not be injured too badly. Now, your company, Top Game Management. Who was your first client? I want to go into that. Like, how did you just decide to, okay, I'm
So
gonna get into
my
this management side?
it was it was never like an on purpose thing. It was very organic. So I got myself my first fight. So I guess I could say I was my own first client. And then I started training in the gym I was at. One of my teammates, I was staying pretty active, and one of my teammates was an amateur at the time as well. And he's like, "Hey, do you think you could get me a fight?" I was like, "I guess." So I got him a fight. His name was Louis Karapi, and he had a pretty decent pro career. He's like still sort of active. He got married, started traveling the world, started having fun, and so I'd say he's 8-4. He started out 5-0. Did really well though. Like so, I did his last amateur fight, and then on that same card, Rico DeShulo. who ended up fighting on the Contender Series a couple summers ago, and I think he's 9-2 now, 9-2 overall. So those are the first two guys that I got fights for, and then from there it was like the guys like Rob Font were there just about to start training MMA, and they're like, "Hey, can I train with the team?" And we're like, "Yeah, jump in." And then he's like, "Can I get a fight?" So I started getting that group of guys their first fights, going through the amateur ranks and all the way through the pros, and then as Rob climbed the ranks, like on the local scene, and he started doing really well, and I was always cornering him and picking all his fights, and then he got to UFC. Then a lot of the other teams that we were friendly with and started asking me like, if they had a good prospect, like, "Hey, what do you think we should do with this kid?" And it just kind of happened. And then they'd come and cross train. Next thing you know, I'm managing some of those guys. And then I think it was in 2015, Ed Cap kept pressuring me to formalize it. He's like, "Dude, you got to call it something. He's like, you're doing a lot of this work behind the scenes. You're doing big things. Um, at least put a name on it. And so that's when we brought Ed on board, and he started running all the social media and setting up the interviews and doing all that stuff. So, but yeah, so it's really been since my first fight was 2008, and then I think 2009 I got my first teammate to fight, and then it was just a slow trickle from there, and it just kind of came into what it's at now.
Going from not having anybody in the UFC to getting your first guy into the UFC, how did that happen? What was the process like? Because a lot of managers right now, starting out, they have no connection to the UFC, and they probably will never ever get a guy in the UFC. It's so hard. But how did you get that your first guy?
No, I was fortunate to have a good network. Like my last few fights, my amateur fights, and my whole pro career, I was training at City Tong, and the head guy there is Mark Delagrati, and he worked for the UFC, so he had connections there too. And then when Rob started getting better, I'm like, we got to get this guy in. Like I don't know what to do. I knew what my limitations were. So then I had a conversation with Rob. I was like, we should probably bring in another guy because I don't want you to not get in the UFC because of me. And then Mark had been a coach on the Ultimate Fighter the year that Charles McCarthy was on as a fighter, Chainsaw Charles McCarthy, and so he knew him. And coincidentally enough, Charles was a manager at the time down in Florida, and one of his pupils was Charles Rosa, whose cousins was Louis Crappie, who's the first guy I managed. So there was the connection between Mark and then one of my fighters, and so I got on the phone with Charles, and I was like, "Hey man, like I got the stud, like I don't know what to do with him. I don't know how to get him in the UFC, but I know he's ready." So then we actually co-managed Rob for like about a year and a half. So we signed him to Guardian Sports Group, which was Charles McCarthy's management company at the time. And Charles was like gracious enough to take me under his wing. He was like a mentor to me for that year and a half. I just asked him all the dumb questions that you could ask someone about, like, who do I call for this, who do I call for that, and I learned the ropes, and he taught it to me. Because at that time, he had like a lot of like studs under his roster. He had like Walt Harris, Tisha Torres, Amanda Nunes, Charles Rosa. So he had like 8 or 9 fighters in the UFC at the time. That if you look at how good they're doing now, it's like crazy. So he taught me the ropes. I got my feet wet, and then he went a separate direction with some other stuff. Got out of MMA for a little while. I think he's back in now, so it's really nice to see him back in cornering Charles Rosa. And then I started handling Rob myself, and then we started getting more guys in, and that's really how it happened. So it was a blessing to have like the connection like I had with Mark at first, and then that he also knew Charles and trusted him from his side. I knew Charles through Lewis, and then so it all just like kind of made sense, and I think everything happens for a reason. So that's kind of how I got the connections, and then just from there it was just getting cycles, and then developing the guys, getting them more wins, and trying to get them noticed.
It's you've been in the game for a while, and it's been a slow grind, but now it seems like this year has been your biggest year. Do you think 2019 has been the biggest year for Top Game?
It's crazy because I guess you could say if like Top Game Management had a face, it would probably be Rob Font because he's like my first guy that I got in the UFC. I've been with him since his first day on the mats up in Boston. Cornered him for all his fights. Like I consider him like a brother. I'm still one of his coaches, um, but he hasn't even fought this year. So it's crazy to think of all the success that we've had with some of these younger guys that we've had without Rob actually ever fighting. Like finally, he's going to fight in a few weeks. But so I think it's like from a numbers standpoint, and then on top of that, a lot of my guys weren't as busy. Some have had injuries, and they kind of had to take long layoffs. So I think we had a couple less fights this year than we did last year, but we have good momentum. Like Jorgen, I think we had 5 guys on the Contender Series, 3 of them got contracts. So 10% of the contracts that were given out this summer came to my guys. When you only got 30 fighters that you're managing total, and you get 10% of the Contender Series contracts, like to me, that's a win. You get 5% of the roster, but 10% of the contracts. I'm happy with that, and I really think the Contender Series has a lot to play with, factor into that, because I'm not a guy that's going on Instagram trying to poach other guys who are in the UFC. Like I don't really do. I'm not that guy. Like a lot of other managers reach out to my guys on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and say, "Hey man, I don't know if you go to manager." They know they have manager, but they say like, "Oh, I don't know if you have manager, but if you don't, or you're not happy, I'd love to chat. I think we can do a lot for you." I don't do that. Like, so I'm not trying to poach anybody. So a lot of my focus is building up young talent. Like I'll work with amateurs, and then 2 or 3 amateur fights, then get them through their whole pro career, with the hopes that we can get them to the UFC. Now, obviously, I'm only working with amateurs that I think have a future, but the Contender Series lays right into that philosophy where I'm building young talent that I believe in, and the Contender Series opens the door a little bit earlier than it used to for those guys. So now it's like a meritocracy. Like you get on the Contender Series, you have a good performance, and you impress Dana, you get that title shot. So it's not necessarily about like, oh well, he comes from this camp or he's with that manager, so he's going to pull some strings or anything like that. It's like it's a meritocracy. You get to 5, 6, and 0. There's a good chance you get on the Contender Series, be one of that 100 fighters that get on, and then you have an audition. You have a really cool job interview. You get to go out there and freaking let it rip. And fortunately, last summer we went 3-2, and 3 guys got contracts, and then even the 2 guys that lost, I feel like they could have won. So I think every summer I think moving forward we should have we should have like that many guys on there every summer, because we got like a lot of talent up here in New England that has just been undervalued, I think, on the national stage the last 15, 20 years, that is finally starting to get the credit it's due. So some of these guys like Rob and Calvin, and obviously Joe Logan and OG, and then Randy Costa and Jorgen, all those guys, and Mike Rodriguez and all the guys, Kyle Bachner, all those guys having success in the UFC and like putting on exciting fights is making I think that's making the UFC realize that, okay, that's a deep pool over there, and those guys come to fight. Even when they lose, they fight. So hopefully it just gets easier to get more guys in. That's the plan anyway.
Yeah, the Contender Series has been incredible for everybody that watches it, to figure out, hey, who are the guys on the regional scene? Who are the guys that are coming up, and have them fight each other, and get that contract. And it gives you an introduction to those guys before they even step into the octagon. It's fun, man. It's a fun time, especially with that Contender Series. And now they're gonna add another Contender Series in Asia, and I heard that they're gonna do like cross Contender Series fights. So I think that would be exciting too.
There you go. Yeah, I saw that they're doing the Contender Series Asia. So I know they did a Brazil season once. I mean, they can just anything they can do to give these young fighters more opportunity. I'm all about. Let these guys get in there, and you know they pay 5 and 5, so that's more than they're going to get locally. So it's a job interview where you're getting paid for it, and it's a cool experience. And I think also that kind of weeds out some of the people that maybe wouldn't have made it, and it kind of weeds them out a little bit earlier. So I'm all for it. I like it. I think it's a cool process. I watch every Tuesday night, and it ends up making for an exciting summer.
Going back to what you were saying about managers sliding into the DMs and reaching out to fighters, and that's kind of like the dirty side of the management part of MMA. And I think in any sport, right? Every sport has it. Every sport has agents, managers, kind of scoping out the talent and seeing who they can get on their side, right? Who they can get on their roster. Um, do you run into that a lot? Do your fighters like reach out to you and say like, "Hey man, like this guy, he's like bothering me basically. Like he's really aggressive."
It's There's like one management company that pretty much they just email anybody that has an O next to their name. Like if you have like a 5 and then an O, they're gonna email you on the regional scene and just be like, "Hey, we'd love to manage you," or and then they pretty much email any company that's any fighter that's in the UFC. They're sending messages every so often just to check in and see if they have anybody. But I mean, it's kind of their job. Like they have to grow, they have to recruit more guys. But at the end of the day, like if they leave me for something like that, if they leave me for a DM, then our relationship wasn't as tight as I thought it was anyway. So I mean, it's it's gonna happen. It's unavoidable. Every industry has its, like you said, those dark sides to it. Um, I think it's just one of those things where on myself, rather than trying to steal, I call them my colleagues because we are really trying to have the same goal. Like we're trying to get these fighters paid as much as they can and accomplish their goals. Like that should be every manager's goal. So like there's a quite a a handful of managers that I network pretty good with, like where we get on calls and we try to share information and we try to, piggyback off each other and see what the market's doing and, you know, get feedback on how, the industry's going at that moment and, you know, um, kind of bounce ideas off each other to help better service our clients. And like I have no problem. Like I'm an open book. Like I'll share exactly what strategy I used with those guys to try to get my guy more money or try to get him a fight quicker than maybe the UFC wanted or whatever. Because a rising tide raises all ships. If they get their guys more money, ultimately it's going to get my guys more money. So like I'm not trying to like run around and pound my chest acting like I'm better than anybody else. Like all I'm trying to do is make sure my guys are happy and get them what I think they deserve. And if I can help other guys do that for their guys, like yeah, like some people will say like, "Oh, you're making your competition look better." It's like, no, I want my competition to do better because it's going to make a better workforce, a better workplace environment for my fighters. So at the end of the day, like I just want my fighters to be able to buy new houses, have kids, have a family, drive nice cars, accomplish their goals, not get hurt, and then hopefully down the road, like retire with some money in the bank and phase into something different that they can, you know, keep living that same lifestyle that they're accustomed to as a fighter.
When you sit back, it seems like you have, you're pretty chill, you do your thing, you don't really bother anybody. You work with well with other, managers and fighters and whoever else you need to work with. When you sit back and watch like this manager on manager, agent on agent beef, like what is going through your mind?
I mean, part of me, it's like I don't. I feel like it's a little bit like trying to judge someone else's marriage. Like you could see what you see on the outside, but you don't really know what's going on. So like I have no idea like what's going on between those guys, and um, and it's honestly really not my business. Like it doesn't phase me, but it'd be cool if I could get verified too. but no, man. At the end of the day, like if those guys do that and they get more press on them, and they say something good in an interview that helps their fighters, like then I guess they did something good. But at the end of the day, like I think our job is to put the fighter first and let people talk about the fighters. Like I always say this is like more on the coach side is when the fighters win, give them the credit. When the fighters lose, like take the blame. And because at the end of the day, like losing sucks, man, and you don't want to be that because you see it a lot with coaches, and I think even maybe some managers is when things are going great, they're raising their hand, they want to be in that camera and they want to be on the spotlight, but when things go bad, they start pointing fingers and well, it's not my fault, he didn't listen and stuff like that. So I think I try to do the opposite. Is I want to try to absorb some of the criticism, take that off my fighters so they don't have to worry about that, and then when that light's shining real bright, put them in the front and make sure that they're right in the middle. So I mean, if they want to, I mean, both those companies are doing pretty well. So you know, that's one strategy. Yeah, it's like I hope I'm never
Yeah.
getting slapped by another manager or slapping another manager, but it is what it is.
With, the media and social media, does it really matter what the fans want? Do you think these like fan campaigns for fights and like fighters tagging other fighters and Dana White and Sean Shelby on social media, does it really help?
I mean, I know sometimes they'll say it's like do the matchmaker's job for them. Two guys agree to fight on a specific date. You see that happen sometimes, but how many times you see two guys call each other out, agree to fight on Twitter, and then the fight never happens? So I think, and then you get like a bunch of retweets and likes off of that. I don't know how much that influences. I think sometimes maybe it influences and sometimes maybe it doesn't. So like it's hard to like I guess my job on that part would be, well, how do I take what my thought is on that and push it down to my fighters to help them be more successful? Is I always say that, if you feel like you want to call someone out, go call someone out. If you feel like you don't want to call someone out, don't call someone out. But don't do it because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Like biggest thing is you just got to be organic in your social media. Like um, if you're faking or putting on an act or you're doing something because you think that's the way it's supposed to be, it never comes off as it never comes off as organic. It looks fake, and it's almost like ends up being worse than not doing it. So my advice always is just do what you feel comfortable doing, and don't try to be someone you're not. Because that'll work for very few people. You know, Chael Sonnen was good with that.
Mhm.
Obviously, Kobe's having success with that right now. But Connor, like, he had great success, kind of laying the groundwork for. Well, actually, Chael was before him, but you know what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
kind of talk trash, call people out, do whatever you need to do. Play, kind of play the heel, play a role. If that's what you are, that's what you are. But don't do it because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Um, but if you want to, if there's a guy you really want to fight, feel like yelling at him on Twitter, go ahead. Some of my fighters aren't really trash talkers, but every now and then they'll be like, I really want to fight this guy, and they'll say something, and that's fine. But as long as it doesn't come off as super fake.
Now let's go back to the last event you guys were at. The team was at in Moscow, for Calvin Kattar. Now talk about that fight. What did you see from the corner and, rewatching it and your assessment of what happened?
I think one thing that they surprised us with is he had a tendency to like move backwards a lot in other fights and kind of do a lot more wrestling. We really thought he'd be moving a lot more backwards, but kudos to him. He came out and he pressured us, and um, I think that threw off Calvin for a little bit in the first round, and then a part of the second was he was trying to pick his shots a little bit too much, where he wasn't getting hurt. You see his fights after the fight, he didn't really have any. He had like a little mark right here. Um, he was blocking a lot of the shots. Calvin has good defense with his high guard and everything, so he wasn't getting hurt, but he just wasn't busy. He was moving backwards, and Zabit was staying in his face, throwing shots, even though Calvin was blocking him. So he just kind of like the round slipped away in the first, and then we wanted more forward pressure or just hold your ground type stuff. And I think in the third round he started to do it. It was like toward the end of the second round, and then the third round he really took over going forward. So um, I think it was a good learning experience for Calvin. Is he realizes you just got to go right away. You can't wait, look for that perfect shot. And if you are covering up and not getting hurt, but you're not throwing shots, you're probably still losing. Um, so I think it's one of those fights, they always say you win or you learn. Um, we didn't win. We definitely did learn, but I think it's put like even more of a fire in Calvin's eyes in terms of knowing where he's at and knowing what he can do. Because I think everybody looks at Zabit as the boogeyman. Like no one, not a lot of people lining up to fight him. A lot of people think he's dangerous, and a lot of people thought, he's the next champion. He's the next guy that's going to be, you know, uh, the champ once everything gets worked out with Max and Alex or Volkanovski or whatever his name is. And we went head to head with him and like took his best of the first two rounds, if you can call it that, and then took it to him in the third. And I know a lot of people are arguing with well, if there's a fourth in the fifth round, but the reality is it was a 3 round contract. He fought a certain way because he knew it was 3 rounds. So who knows what would have happened in 5 rounds? Um, I have a feeling down the road, I wouldn't be surprised if down the road they end up doing a 5 round fight. But a lot of things have to line up for that. But I think the one thing I can really take away from it is that Calvin Stock didn't go down in that fight. I think there's a few people that are like, oh, Zabit's not what we thought he was. But then there's a majority that are thinking like, wow, Calvin's more than we thought he was. And we have always believed in Calvin, and we knew that he's a contender. But he went toe to toe with the guy that no one wants to fight, and really just got outpointed for a round and 2/3, call it, and then dominated the other round and a third. So he just got outpointed, which is that's part of it. You have to win the whole fight. Um, but you see what Zabit's done to some of these other like world class fighters, like takes them down, mauls them, takes their back, beats them up a little bit, annoys them, frustrates them, like clearly wins rounds. It didn't happen here, So I think Calvin also got to answer a little bit of questions about his wrestling defense. People say, "Oh, he doesn't have wrestling." Calvin's a great wrestler. I think he showed that in the fight. He the beat shot once, he defended it real easy, and then he threw that trip he does. It was a pretty cool trip.
Yeah.
But he popped right back up, fought the hands, and got away. So, um, a lot of other people haven't been able to do that with the beat, and I think that'll be interesting to see if they can kind of do that moving forward. But I'm bummed we lost, but leaving it, you know, I wish we would have pressured a little bit more early. But if we ever got that fight again, it's a fight that we'd be excited about, not like, oh crap, how do we win? So if that makes any sense.
Yeah, man. I think that it will happen in the next year or so. I believe so, man. It just kind of leaves a lot of questions, that fight. Like what would happen. You know, a lot of the fans, you know, they have a lot of questions about like, oh yeah, you know, if there was another round or two or whatever, you know, if he went in there and did it this way, or you know, the strategies were different, what would happen? You know, what I mean, and Calvin, he goes in there with that. I think he has a little bit more excitement to his name compared to Zabit. If if I'm being honest, you know, I mean, Zabit, he's, if you really look at it, he is a point fighter. He'll go out there and outpoint you. He can finish you, but it's not like Calvin. Calvin will go in there and destroy your face, right? That's like the moniker, or that image he has. So I think that it's gonna happen again. But moving forward, you know, who do you think Calvin could fight next? Like, what are some of the options you see?
I think this sets up for, well, there's a lot of moving parts. Like obviously the December 21st card, that's going to be a big indicator. I think if the Korean Zombie wins, I think he's right there where he's probably deserves the next title shot. He's got a been around, real good win over Moicano. If he walks through Ortega, who just fought for the title, it's hard to deny him a title shot, in my opinion. Like the fan in me, but then also, you know, looking at it from like a strategic standpoint, like it makes sense. He's with South Korea, he's carrying a country. You can go out there and fight, you know, whoever wins that fight the week prior. Um, if Ortega wins, I don't necessarily think he gets a title shot because of, you know, he just coming off a bad loss to Max. So if he wins, I think then maybe he goes and fights someone like a Yair, and then maybe Zabit gets the title shot, and then maybe we slide in and we fight the Korean Zombie. You know, so I think, you know, and a lot of people are saying like Stevens and Emmett are out there, but I think we just fought the number 5 guy. Now he's number 4. We went toe to toe with him. We showed that we belong at that top 5 level. So it'd be nice to get another like top 5 type fight. Um, I was a little surprised that we didn't bump up a little bit in the rankings. I thought we'd leapfrog a couple guys just based on how well we did. Um, but I mean, at the end of the day, the rankings don't necessarily matter. It's we just need to fight another top guy. So yeah, I mean, I could see us getting the loser of Ortega and the Korean Zombie if they both, you know, depending on if they're healthy or not. And then obviously, yeah, years out there. Um, you know, and then it'll be interesting to see what Edgar and Aldo do down at 35 if they decide to come back up, or how that works out. So a lot of moving parts, but I think the next few weeks are going to shuffle some things, shake some things up, and then kind of we'll see how everything falls into place. But Calvin's healthy; he's ready to go. Um, you know, he just wants another big fight. He wants a chance to redeem himself. He's hungry, so I'm excited to see how he does. You know, last time he lost, he came out with 2 first round knockouts in a row. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
you know, light the fire under him. So I'm excited to see
yeah.
him come back. And I really don't think that there's anybody above us that matches. That's a bad matchup. Calvin's, you know, he hits hard. He's got precise boxing. He showed the big knock on one of the knock on him before this was that he can't check leg kicks, and he doesn't have a ground game. You know, the things we were hearing, and I think he was 8 for 8 on throwing leg kicks, and then he checked every leg kick that came to him, and he defended the takedown. Um, so I don't think there's really anybody above us that can like really pose like a unwinnable situation. Like Calvin can beat all the guys that are above us right now. So I'm just excited about to see him fight to his full potential and keep climbing the ladder.
December is a massive month for the featherweight division. You got the title fight with Holloway and Volkanovski. Then you got the zombie that you mentioned against Ortega. If you're a 145er in the top 15 and you don't have a fight scheduled, do you feel like you need to be ready? You need to be on call because you never know what can happen.
I mean, if we would have beat Zabit, I would have been pushing the UFC to say, "Hey, listen, bring us to Vegas in 2 weeks or a few weeks, and let us be the alternate," because that would have been great. You know, weigh in and just be ready in case anybody falls out, but or even South Korea. But obviously, it didn't pan out. But I think, yeah, I think those guys got to sit around and be ready. Calvin, you know, he's already asking, "Hey, who's on this card in DC?" Because he's going down with Rob to corner him, and I'm like, slow down, you know. But yeah, you know, you get the guys like Shane Burgos out there. What is he, 7-1 in the UFC now? He's only
Yeah.
lost it to Calvin. Like he sits around healthy, and he can make weight. Like, you know, opportunities like that come up for guys like Shane and Calvin. You just got to be ready. Um, I think the smart ones should stay ready, but I think around the holidays, Thanksgiving, it's easier said than done, right?
Yeah. next couple weeks, you got a few guys, coming up. You got Rob Font. He's number 10 in the division. He's taking on Ricky Simone. Man, he's been off for like a year. What is the atmosphere around Rob right now?
Frustrated, hungry, ready to kill someone. He's been a healthy scratch all year. There's been no injuries. He's been pushing for a fight. We didn't get a turnaround as fast as we wanted after the Sergio Pettis fight, but that's the sport. You can't always just fight whenever you want unless you're Cowboy Cerrone. He's earned that right. Um, so we were pushing for a fight, and it didn't happen until June. And we were going to fight Cody Stamen, a fight that we wanted. And 2 weeks out, Cody pulled out, and we asked for Lineker. Like, that was a loss on our record. We want that back. And Lineker took the fight, and then 10:30 at night, the day before weigh-ins, 10:30 at night, the day before weigh-ins, UFC called and said the fight's off. And we were gutted. And so we didn't even weigh in the next day. They're just like, we're going to get you a quick turnaround. And then it's like we had these opportunities. We said yes to everything. It's just for one reason or another, it was like a series of unfortunate events, like no negligence on anybody's part. It's just like everything that was lined up just never came to happen. And we were always ready. So pretty much the whole summer, Rob was dieting in fight camp, ready to go. And then when the quick turnaround didn't happen, it was like, you're definitely on the Boston card. And then it just never materialized. It was even up until 2 weeks out, we were dieting. And then it was, okay, we're going to focus on December 7th. But then even then, it was like a few weeks that we didn't even have a name. It's just hard because, he's coming off a long layoff. He looked good in his last fight. And when you're ranked, it's hard to find fights that make sense, that like the UFC was like, yeah, that makes sense for both sides. They don't want us to murder anybody, obviously. And obviously we want to climb the ladder. So it's like, just sitting around waiting for the right opportunity. And, Rob's been a company man. He said yes to everything. And just for whatever reason, they haven't materialized. And so finally it came down to December 7th. This is who's available. Ricky Simone called him out last February, I think, after maybe it was the Montel Jackson win. And, he wasn't, I think he was going to enter the rankings right after that fight. And that's a fight that we've always felt comfortable with. I think it's a good stylistic matchup for Rob. And, all he's done the last year is get better at wrestling and hone his striking. So, going against a guy like Ricky Simone, it's a perfect comeback fight for Rob, even though he never left. He's just been training and dieting for a year. So he's it's exciting to see him get back in there. It's going to be 51 weeks. We fought December 15th last year against Sergio Pettis in Milwaukee. So I'm excited to see him get back in there and just get momentum back. Good win in Sergio Pettis' hometown, big name on Fox. The Fox crew followed around for a couple of days. It was like we had good momentum leaving that fight, and then it's just we have to build it back up again.
Another guy on your roster, Mike Rodriguez, he also had a series of unfortunate events, in his last fight where he had like the late replacement and then he went in there and fought the guy. The guy was on some stuff, you know what I mean? I don't really remember exactly what it was on. He's been suspended for 1 year by USADA. Talk about Mike and the mental side of like going through a whole fight and then afterwards it gets overturned and it's basically he didn't even fight, you know what I mean? Like it's just gone, that fight.
I mean, he left that fight kind of banged up. So I think his focus has just been on recovery. Um, so for him, it's like the fight definitely happened because he's licking his wounds and he's getting healthy. He's been going through a bunch of PT and then finally get him back in where he can train full time again. And he's healthy going into this fight. And it's tough, man, because you hear that and you're like, damn it, I lost, but they cheated. And it's like you don't really know what happened. Maybe they took the wrong cough syrup. I don't know, but at the end of the day, like we went in and we did everything we were supposed to do as a professional. We made weight, we passed our drug test, we showed up to fight, we didn't quit, and then find out a few weeks later that hey, the other guy didn't hold up his end of the bargain. It's a tough pill to swallow. I mean, the cool wipes an L off your record, but at the end of the day, it doesn't get you that second paycheck and it doesn't climb you up the ladder. So it stinks, but at the end of the day, like just like on the management side, like cheating and foul play is just part of any fact of life. So it's just something we have to deal with. And I think Mike's been too professional about it. Like he doesn't even bring it up. He's not like he's like, oh, that guy cheated, that screwed up. Like he's just like, all right, like let me get healthy and like let's get back in there. And I think this is a good fight coming off of, it was July, so not a ton, not a huge layoff, but a couple minor dings that he had to heal up, and now come back, and Sink's having to fly halfway around the world to go get a fight, but it'll be a good experience for him, and he's gonna go out there a little bit early. His weight's already good, and get to see a different part of the world and a new culture, and really he had a good fight this time. He felt like he just couldn't pop off last time. He said he felt like he was having trouble managing distance in the fight, like So now it's time to redeem himself, and he's got another chance to go out there. He's got another fresh 15 minutes to go out there and wipe the taste of that last one out of his mouth.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what I meant earlier about it was like on paper, it like never
Oh yeah,
happened basically. Of course
yeah,
he went
yeah,
in
yeah,
there. I watched that fight,
yeah,
I've interviewed Mike a few times. He's so fun to talk with, man. He has a great personality, and he goes in there and he puts in work. So I'm excited to see what he can do coming off this and all healed up and but traveling across the world is not so fun, but hey, you got to do it for the UFC, I guess.
yeah. You don't want to say no too many times, 'cause then they get pissed. But uh, I think it's a good fight too. Like Jung is a game opponent. He uh, he likes to use his hands. He's good in the clinch. Obviously, if you watch his last fight, he weathered that early storm and then came back with a cool choke in the third. I think it makes for an exciting fight. Like Mike's not a boring fighter. He had that Tevin Giles fight where he just got wrestle humped out in New York for a little bit, but then he gassed out, and then he came back his next fight and lacerated a kid's liver, and then his last fight, fought that kid, but it was still a decent fight, and I'm excited for him to come back full camp, ready to go, nothing to lose. You're in their hometown, like it's almost less nerves than fighting at home, so it's I'm excited, man. I think I don't think Mike scratched he's just scratching the surface on his potential. Like he can be so good. When he puts it all together, you see those flashes of greatness, but it's starting to become like more often. So, and he's a funny dude. He's
Yeah.
the Mick Pro tips he does on
Yeah, yeah,
Instagram, and
yeah,
and he's got the here's a fun fact. He's got the biggest feet in the UFC. Him and
What?
Bigfoot Silva. Yeah, him and Bigfoot Silva. I guess both have size 16.
God dang. Uh,
Like walking on
hey,
boats.
that's crazy. One last thing before I let you go is do you think the Patriots and the Seahawks will meet in the Super Bowl this year?
I don't know. I, it's just such a weird year for the Patriots. Like I feel like we got good coaching, we got a good quarterback, we kind of figure out how to win. We started off hot, but all I care about from Seattle is the next 2 weeks. I need Lockett to have lights out games for me. I'm in dead last in my fantasy football league,
Oh,
and I
okay.
need Lockett to step up. And if I win the next 2 weeks and things line up, I could end up in third place. So, it'd be cool. You guys need some redemption, right? We got that.
Yeah,
We took it from you last time.
yeah.
What do you think?
Man, I wish. I wish. I just love I just want to see Wilson take on Brady before Brady hangs him up, cuz he's only got a couple years left, so if it's
Yeah,
not this year, why not, when will it happen? So, I love the Patriots, man. I'm a big fan of the Patriots even though they're not my team, but I would love my team to, take them on in the Super Bowl again.
that'd be nice. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Oh man, it was great chatting with you, man. There's so many other guys that I wanted to talk about, but then it would be like 3 hours. So
I
I
I
don't want to
I,
take too
I
much of
freaking
your
blab.
time.
Now we're good.